oh, sorry, please, I introduced him. You please welcome Ralph.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here, my first time in Australia, and I confess I'm still a little jet lagged, so I need the lectern in case I get woozy. Just flew in the other day. I understand that the TEXA conference last year came right at the election. So I get to report, I have the opportunity, I won't say it's a privilege, but an opportunity to report what's happened in the past year. I want to thank Anthony, who is on the advisory board for the Quality Assurance Commons that I created, and I'll be talking a bit about that. And I've gotten to know his work through the Quality Beyond Boundaries group, and I really appreciate his work and the work of TEXA. So I'm delighted to be here, and I must also say I prepared a talk before I listened to the session yesterday, and I got depressed by my own talk about what's happened in the last year. So I'm going to focus not only on what's happening in the Trump administration, with respect particularly to higher education, but then what's inspiring me, because I need as much inspiration as anyone else in the country. And there actually is a lot going on I'd like to highlight, and we share so many issues that you have that I heard yesterday. I thought it might be helpful. I think it's really important to say that much of the U.S. is still stunned, in despair, and depressed. Those are the ones who obviously did not vote for President Trump. And there is still a very solid core of 32 to 36%. It's gone down a little bit in the past year, but a very solid core of those who remain adamantly in support of him. It would be easy to say that those who support him are only those without education, but there were demographics that belie that, including members of my own family, a nephew of mine and his wife, both of whom have university degrees. He has an MBA, and there is no explaining it, but it has caused major divisions in families, being unable to talk to one another who voted differently. What we are witnessing a year in is a very deliberate and methodical deconstruction of the very concept of a progressive state, which has actually been part of Republican and Democratic administrations for the last 4 presidents. You can certainly say that Steve Bannon, who was President Trump's campaign advisor, head of campaign strategy, became chief of strategy in the White House, now left, but has spoken often about wanting to create chaos and to destroy what they call the deep state or the administrative state. There is a methodical way in which that is being done that 1 year in seems to be the approach, which is, number one, not to fill senior level positions in every major cabinet position. Number two is to quickly nominate and approve with a Republican-controlled Congress a whole large group of vacant judicial appointments. Federal appointees are for life, who are Republican, not necessarily Republican, but are highly conservative, including one who had never been in a courtroom, had never litigated a case, but who happened to be the husband of somebody who worked in the White House, had a law degree. I'm sure you're aware that science doesn't have a home in the White House. There is no senior level White House advisor on science matters, which has always been a major position. And of course you know that climate change denial is rampant. There is not a single Republican member of Congress who publicly will acknowledge there is climate change. And of course, there is Rick Perry, the Secretary of the Department of Energy, and Greg Pruitt, the former Attorney General of Oklahoma, who is the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, both of whom are actively working to both deny climate change and to ignore, overrule recommendations of their own staff that have scientific foundation. The staff even published a report, a scientific community, acknowledging the increase in climate change incidence, and notwithstanding that, and other findings with respect to carcinogenic implications of particular pesticides and the like, gone ahead and acted regardless of the scientific findings. It's not easy for those of us who believed in the power of education, those of us who believed in the power of the progressive state that would, and that the values of the United States, which would be open to all comers, and an immigrant nation, one that has the Statue of Liberty as a beacon of hope. The desire to pull out of the Paris Accord, pulling out of NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I could go on and on. The very version of America First is something that was first used by pro-Nazis in the 1930s. So many of us don't believe that it was by accident that that term is being used. And there is a deep concern, unlike the tweets or the retweets that occurred overnight, if you saw that, that the President of the United States is open to, if not actively supportive of white nationalism and neo-Nazi groups. It's not a pretty sight for many of us, let's just say. And at the same time, we all need to work toward a common future. The divisions in the U.S. Are very challenging, particularly in Congress, to have anything accomplished between the Democrats and the Republicans. I should say the Republicans themselves are splintered, which is why there's been very little legislative achievement in the past year. And the Democrats are still split between the Bernie Sanders progressive wing and the more moderate wing. Hillary Clinton no longer has really any influence, and the publication of her book, I don't think, helped much in terms of the support from the Democratic Party. That being said, people worry that, is there an alternative? If you saw the New Yorker article on the vice president, there are those who would say that the devil that you know may be better than the one you don't know. So in that environment, let me speak about the Department of Education with whom I have worked for some time. Betsy Devos, you may know, is the secretary. Her background is that she is a billionaire and worked very assiduously in Michigan to bring state funds for charter schools, for Christian charter schools, public funds, and was able to get past an experiment where in Detroit, the charter schools were opened up with, depends on whose research you follow. Some say they were successful and some say highly unsuccessful. She has no experience in public policy and education at a national level, nor any experience whatsoever with higher education. I do know people who have talked with her, and she openly acknowledges that. And it is clear that higher education is neither her priority nor is it President Trump's. Most recently, at a talk, she questioned our continuing policy to promote degrees. There has been a deliberate effort to overturn every Obama regulation the last 8 years, and one of the things that President Obama made as a national priority was to move our degree holder rate of adults in the U.S. from slightly under 40% to 60% by 2020. We no longer hear anything about that goal of increasing the number of degree holders. There is one thing that the administration is very concerned about, which is jobs. Blue-collar work particularly, whether it's in the coal country or in what's called the Rust Belt in the middle of the U.S. The challenge is that 90% of the jobs that were created since the recession in 2008, 90% require a college degree, at least an associate degree, many bachelor's degree. The data is overwhelming that lifetime earnings, social mobility of those who hold a degree is far greater. The unemployment rate for high school graduates is double that. Even as the unemployment rate has gone down, it has not gone down as much. The number of jobs are shrinking for those without post-secondary or higher education. So that is I should say one other thing that just came out was that we're not sure whether this will be a trend. The United States has been number one in terms of international enrollments. For the first time, 2016, those enrollments went down, largely at community colleges, which have been doing a lot of international recruiting, and in master's programs. Over 80% of doctoral students in the sciences are international students in the U.S. I think a startling statistic about we're training the scientists to leave the U.S. because there is really not as much a place for them around key issues as there was in the past. And of course, we, along with many other countries, have proved or have moved to be against immigration, not only building a wall, what President Trump promised in the southern border, but also the limitation of HB1 visas, which allows professionals to come in and to do work primarily for Google and Apple and the tech companies. I should say one other trend, one of the things the Obama administration did was really focus on abuses, alleged abuses, in the for-profit industry. At the time, the for-profits were enrolling about 12% of the student population, and there were a number of very large, 100,000 plus publicly traded companies in the 1990s. When the doors were opened to more for-profit education, the stocks of these companies were the fastest growing of any. And the efforts, rightly or wrongly, because there were some concerns about federal overreach, during the Obama years, 2 major enterprises closed. Corinthian College, with 70,000 students, closed overnight, out on the street students. And ITT closed overnight 44,000 students by actions of the U.S. Department of Education under the Obama administration. There is a defensive borrower statute, means if you can claim and prove fraud on the part of your provider, you will get a full tuition refund. There are thousands of claims that have been filed as a result of these and other closings, and one of the actions that the Department of Education has done is sit on them, and very few have been processed in the past year. Last data I saw, I believe, was 70,000 applications. The Obama administration also put a great deal of attention on sexual violence, sexual harassment, issued a set of Dear Colleague letters of regulations as a major issue, and you may have seen not only the conversation yesterday with the film The Hunting Ground, but the AAU, the premier research university, did a survey. 20 to 25% of women across the board felt or reported, of those who reported, that they had been impacted by sexual either harassment or assault. A smaller percentage claimed to be assaulted or raped. but it's a major problem. Again, the Devos administration has brought in the senior lawyer for this department, who is quoted as having said that the problem is really one of booze and remorse 6 months later. So you can imagine, and there was quite some considerable confusion about what the Obama administration has done. So we'll say it was not a perfect record. The challenge is that there's no one to talk to in the department. Since there are no senior level officials, there's no declaration of higher ed policy, and therefore it's a very large policy vacuum. So as you can understand, as I prepared my remarks, I thought that I myself got depressed. And I'm aware of the fact, and I work both extensively in the U.S. as the head of an accrediting agency up until a few years ago with the creation of a new enterprise, work outside the U.S. There is really a lot going on that is good. So I will say I'd like to shift towards saying that there is a lot that is inspiring about what is happening in higher ed. One of my mentors, who works on workforce policy in the District of Columbia, national and federal workforce policy, keeps reminding me that federal policy no longer controls what's happening in the workplace. Google controls, Apple controls, the tech industries do, Tesla controls. Every CEO in the world is worried about being disrupted by an Uber or a Tesla. So there are issues. The workplace is changing. Some statistics from the U.S. Department of Labor that the expectation is that today's college graduates, it will get worse, or I don't know if I'd say worse, it will get more, will have at least 10 jobs by the time she is 40. The average payscale.com says that the average length of time in their job is 3.8 years. People move rather quickly. There is competing data. Some say 5%, some say 10%, some say 20%, but growing will participate in the gig economy, will not have full-time work. And if you ever have any of you have heard of Taskrabbit? Some of you have. Well, Taskrabbit is an online, and there are many others like this, where you can say, I need a job done, can you do it? And you will get an instantaneous response at about 20% or 10% of what you would pay going to an established firm. And these are freelance workers on graphic design, on web design, on accounting, on anything that you want, including moving furniture. There are 6 million unfilled jobs in the U.S. These are jobs that are largely dependent on critical thinking, on the need for graduates to be able to be, or for the workers to be adaptive. The workforce needs are dramatically changing as automation, artificial intelligence takes hold dramatically. So as Bob Jones, my mentor, says, frankly, the federal government is so far behind on the policy curve that having a vacuum is not as much a problem as whether higher education itself can adapt to these changes. So I'd like to use my remaining time to highlight what I think are a number of trends that are very exciting, that are happening in a lot of different institutions. And to say that we've moved to already a knowledge-based economy in the U.S. Yes, there is going to be industry, and they want to bring offshore jobs back. But the future, it depends on knowledge. It depends on a set of skills that I think are wrongly defined as soft skills, not just competence in computer science or programming, but a set of workplace skills that I'll talk more about. So let me just say, just by way of quick background about the U.S. I don't know how much you know about the U.S. higher ed system. 4,500 institutions, 21 million students, a huge range and array. In my accrediting agency, we accredited institutions from 30 students to over 100,000 students. The whole California State and University of California systems, one had 50,000 students, the other had 175,000 students, to, again, small boutique institutions, faith-based institutions, specialized chiropractic colleges, and a whole range. So, like I said, over 4,000 institutions, over 3,000 are regionally accredited. 45% of the students are in community colleges. So the issue of transfer or what they do afterwards is a very big issue, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There has been a major shift from public support for higher education to put the burden on students, and tuition, even in public universities, has now become, and room and board or whatever, fees, a huge issue. And the federal government outlay for financial aid is $150+ billion a year. The loan debt is well over $1 trillion. And so one of the first trends I'll talk about is a big shift from inputs to outcomes. ROI, what's the return on this investment? There is real concern that we're not getting enough return on investment. There has been a dramatic, we still look at high selectivity, high elite institutions for Harvard and the Ivies and Stanford. The big issue is who gets in, and we don't, and not worry so much about what happens to them while they're there. But the majority of students in the U.S. are really those students who don't make it to the elite colleges. Only 7 to 10% are in those institutions. So the shift to an outcomes-based model has dramatic impact. A second part of that shift is from teaching to learning, a shift in the role that, given the students have very variable and sometimes insufficient preparation, a learning-centered model is critical. How many of you are familiar with a seminal work, in the U.S. at least, called From Teaching to Learning by Barr and Tagg? I would urge, it's a 1994 piece that actually has transformed the thinking in the U.S. about the model. You can get it online, you can email me, I'll send you a copy of it. But it talks about a paradigm shift, about moving toward a learning-centered model. Every accrediting agency in the U.S. has now moved to an outcomes-based model, and the regionals have moved to a student learning outcomes model that calls for identification at the course, program, and institutional level. There's been a shift to every student counts model. 20 years ago, there was huge attrition, there still is, but now public policy says every student needs to count. There's Complete College America, which is really focusing on the U.S. data is that the attrition rate is probably around 35% over a 4 to 6 year period. But work of Howard Gardner has shown that most of that attrition is in the first year. Students can't afford, they stop in, stop out. But many do not complete, and the ones who don't complete can't get the jobs, can't pay their loans. Loan defaults are a very big issue. One of the big innovations in the U.S. is co-remediation. Students who are in remedial programs would get stuck, not complete, not get college credit. So now there's a big effort to co-remediation. The entire California State University system is moving to that over the next 18 months. And the research shows that that has a big impact, as does attention to completion in the first year. Shift toward personalized education. Descriptive analytics. There is a tremendous amount of work on where do students get stuck. Often it's not just in STEM courses, the introductory STEM, but there's a lot of research now showing in the gateway courses where large groups of students take the courses, could be in psychology, political science, sociology, but then don't move on, to get stuck in those courses. Predictive analytics, a lot of AI. Arizona State has done a lot of work. There's a group called Civitas with over 600,000 students that is trying to work with when students don't show up for class, or early intervention if they're not performing well, don't turn in homework. Arizona State is a good model of how this has made a very substantial impact on completion. I would also say with respect to personalized education, there is a small group, but an increasingly large group, that are trying to apply the lessons from neuroscience. I've just been talking with a researcher who gave up tenure at University of Arizona, is now working at Stanford on what's called Universal Design for Learning, and working with Research Hospital at University of California, San Francisco, for people on the spectrum of autism, people with ADHD, and they have found that there are now at least 7 different genetic codes through brain scans that have implications on how people learn to read, and not just dyslexia, but a whole range of reading issues. We got to bring that knowledge into not only the pedagogy, but also into the workplace. I also want to talk about shift to not just personalized education, but personally directed education. How many of you have heard about the University Fellows Alliance? Anyone heard of that? I'm sure there must be students from Australia who've been involved, but this was something started by Stanford a few years ago, and it was to take students, bring them into the design school. I don't know if you've heard, Stanford created what they call a D school, which is an open space, and people from all over the world come and do IDEO, design from that. But the whole idea of the University Fellows Alliance is to empower students to engage in work that's of greatest value to them back on their home campus. They now have an alumni group of several thousand students. They have people from all over the world. They come in, they spend a month, I believe it's 4 to 6 weeks, on the Stanford campus, go into Silicon Valley, and they design, using the D School principles, projects that they take back at home. We have one fellow, an alumna of the Fellows Program, on our Student Advisory Board at the Quality Assurance Commons, and the work they're doing is extraordinary, bringing transformation, student-centered and student-driven transformation into their campuses. How many of you have heard of maker fairs? Some of you have. Maker fairs is an incredibly exciting thing where inventors off the grid. It started in 2006 in New York and in San Francisco. Over 600,000 students. People come with their families, and they make things. They work with inventors and designers, and they're now all over the country. And one of the major projects that I've heard that University Fellows have done is they go back to their campuses and they host maker fairs to engage students to do what is they're interested in designing. Innovation labs, incubator labs. I don't know if you have those. Many campuses are doing that. They bring industry in and actually sell. And of course, Stanford has done the best job of that, of creating so many millionaires. I don't know if you've heard of Sagata Mitra, who won the TED Prize. You might want to look up his Hole in the Wall project about teachers need to get out of the way, and that really students are so driven by curiosity. What they need are powerful questions, and they will discover it for themselves. I don't have time to tell you about the exciting work he did with non-English language students, putting a computer up in a wall in a Tamil village in India, where they learned how to they learned in English how DNA replicates without even knowing English or never having seen a computer before, out of their curiosity. Wonderful experience. A shift to career education, and that's what I want to say the QA Commons is about. In the US, there's a tremendous gap between the content knowledge that students have and the skills that enable them to be successful in the workplace. And we are designing a program-level certification process that we're no longer calling them soft skills, we're saying essential employability qualities. We want to move beyond what I call the body count metrics of how many got a first job, how many got what salary, at what level, as if that is the definition of quality. The real issue is over a lifetime, or at least the first 5 to 10 years of work, as these graduates go through multiple jobs, if not careers. Stanford has created something called BEAM. Instead of career services, they now start in the first week, as many institutions do, and it's called Building or bridging education, ambition, and meaningful work. And they're using strengths finders. They're doing all kinds of work that's way beyond creating resumes. And out of their work, and their work with the D School at Stanford, two authors created a book called Designing Your Life, and which has become a bestseller. I saw it on my daughter's book stand the other day, and I said, my God, I'm working with the people who are doing that. And we're trying to bring the whole idea that faculty now need to really talk about careers for their students. Richard Light at Harvard did a study a number of years ago and said, what led to students going into their careers? It was not career services. In fact, data shows about 37%, at least in surveys, go to get career counseling in the US. It was a faculty member saying, you'd be good at this. Jane, you'd be really good, particularly to get a PhD in sociology or something like that. Joseph Aoun, who's the president of Northeastern, which he's done a great job at Northeastern, just wrote a new book called Robotics, Future-Proofing, Future-Proofing Your Education, something like that. He was talking about the faculty now need to be career advisors, which is something faculty are not trained to do, but this is what students need. So we are working to bring career services and a whole new concept of career services about outcomes for what used to be called the soft skills, we're calling essential employability qualities, and to really get programs to to build on their conversation about learning to incorporate these kinds of activities. Just two other things quickly. I know I just am at 30 minutes, and I want to welcome your questions. There are a lot of new providers in the U.S., coding academies, well over 100,000 students in every major city. The irony about coding academies is their promise is you'll get a job within 6 months at 6 figures, or at least. And they're very successful at that, except over 95% of those who enroll already have a bachelor's degree. So it's not opening IT up to new people. So there are new approaches to coding. Community colleges are working, integrating coding academies into the work and the like. I work with, I've known Sebastian Trun, who created Udacity, and he is quite amazing. He designed the self-driving car for Google. I have to say brilliant. But one thing we don't know is he tried to work with San Jose State to use his Udacity model, the MOOC model, to teach calculus, and he failed. And he says his course, his own language, he says his courses really did not succeed. Now, partly it was total faculty resistance at San Jose State, but part of it was we don't know how to design these MOOC courses for the students, the underrepresented first-generation students. We have not succeeded with that. And I think that's a big challenge. He's been very successful with nano degrees, and again, most of his students are already bachelor's degree holders. And finally, let me just say that I think there is a shift in the role of quality assurance agencies. I'm very interested in the work Texas is doing. In the US, we are required, every institution is required to do a comprehensive self-study at least every X years. For us, it's 10 years with a 5th-year review. Many are shifting to 7 years with a 3.5-year review and a site visit. And so we are all looking at risk-based model, and the whole idea of doing a desk audit is something very fresh and new, and I know a lot of people have come here, and I've learned a lot and want to learn more, and I want to say that international provision and quality assurance in international provision is again a key issue. So let me conclude by saying, let's not get caught up in depression, or at least I'm speaking to myself as much as you. There is a lot going on, and I know there's a lot going on in your institutions. I would love to share what is really exciting that's happening in higher education, regardless of what tweet comes out of the president's office today or tomorrow, because it may countermand what he said the day before, but you don't know. I just want to say that we cannot inspire others if we're not inspired ourselves. We cannot lead others if we don't believe in the power and the transformational impact of higher education. It is something I've devoted my life to. I'm looking forward to the Quality Assurance Commons being one voice among many that will help move this transition forward to a new model of higher education. And I look forward to working with you and hope there is opportunity for questions and to interact with you the remainder of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. On the note of makerspaces, which is an area I know a little bit about, which I think is a very interesting innovation space in many higher education providers, particularly universities, but not exclusively. Mostly they seem to be located in libraries. And because they're makerspaces, this reiterates this idea that education is appointment-based, that it's place-based in some way. So what they've done in America, which I think is even more interesting than makerspaces, is maker buses. And they have mobile pop-ups, basically, that will go around to places where education is more difficult to access and create these spaces locally.
That's true. There are in inner cities, particularly high schools and the like. The creativity of the human being is so enormous, and that's what we need to cultivate.
Yeah. We have some questions and a little bit of time, so we'll run straight to the first one. How does the outcomes-based approach fit with the concept of volume of learning? Is there a discussion of competency rather than time-based completion?
Yes, there's a major effort called CBE, Competency-Based Education. There is a working group. We're actually part of the QA Commons. We have 27 programs. Two are competency-based, and we're working with them as part of our pilot. The challenge is they are, at least in the U.S., there are different models of CBE. Those that are from the ground up are very costly to develop. And secondly, employers have yet to demonstrate that they believe they are better than traditional reputation-based degrees. We have a big sales job. Personally, in working with the development and as an accreditor, we are responsible to review and approve all competency-based programs, the accrediting agencies. And some of them are really exciting and are mastery-based, not time-based. The challenge also in the U.S. of financial aid is time-based. And unfortunately, the people in the department at the FSA, the Financial Services Administration of the department, don't believe in competency-based education. So if you can believe it, they require all competencies to be converted to credit hours. Enough said.
This is, I think, just a quick one. Who funds the tuition refund arrangements?
I'm sorry?
Who funds the tuition refund arrangements?
Federal government. Billions of dollars are at stake, which is why no action is being taken.
We've got probably two more, I think. With the Trump administration's apparent xenophobia, I don't know why that word's there, and stand against immigration, could reduction of international student enrollment rates bring a rise in the value of higher education as it would be an American first policy? So what will the impact be of anti-immigration policies on pricing in higher education? We see this as well with the immigration policies for workers on short-term visas for Google and Microsoft. And in fact, the kickback against Trump's anti-immigration policies came from
there's a lot of pushback from the tech companies to the Trump policies. I mean, even though, part of the challenge is that the tech industry has been not entirely, but largely Democratic. And the smokestack industries have been largely Republican. So there's a lot of competition here about the H-1B visas and who gets them and the like. But I would say that the real issue is that who is going to do the future work in our country. And immigrants have actually been a net plus to the whole system, even though Fox News and others would suggest that they're largely criminals. I mean, Trump started his campaign on an escalator calling all Mexicans rapists. So there is this challenge to those who come across the border versus those who have education. And we're still grappling with it. We don't know the implications yet.
So I think we have time for one last question. Would Ralph like political asylum here?
I think it was worth saying, well, first of all, I'm still very hopeful with the changes that I see, but the day after the Trump election, the websites crashed about emigrating to Canada. And a lot of people are still seriously considering, can they stay in this environment? It is very personally, the irony is it's very personally affronting to many people. And I cannot tell you the number of conversations that I've had of people who are, the stunned is the right word, 1 year later. And on the other side, there are many who are Republicans who are gleeful that the Obama, I mean, years were spent blocking the Obama administration, attacking whether he was an American, where he had been born. And so this divide is very real. It's visceral. The reaction to Hillary Clinton is visceral. The reaction to Trump is visceral. There is yet, and he is not seeking to bridge that gap, and there is no one who can speak to bridging that gap. So I would just say political asylum may be something, but I would look forward to another visit here without asylum.
Well, my advice is if you do seek asylum in Australia, don't come by boat. And on that delightful note,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ralph.